Some business news now. It's Happy Friday to Peter Switzer, founder of the Switzer Report. Good morning to you, Pete. Hope you're going well, mate.
How are you guys?
Let's talk jobs first of all. They dropped from 5.3% to 5.2%, heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I think psychologically it's important to see that unemployment's fallen. We know it's particularly driven by a slight fall in the participation rate. That participation rate is actually at a record high level, so that's not too bad. And I think the important point is that full-time jobs went up like 26,200. So, you know, many aspects of the economy are not looking all that great, but gee, the job market is looking terrific. It's now 36 months of employment rising consecutively, and that's a record. Never happened before.
Yeah, we saw certainly the Prime Minister pushing that as a political point yesterday. In question time in Parliament all week, the economy has been the focus. The IMF downgrading a global growth forecast, but they were particularly bad for Australia. The markets didn't react, which probably tells you that these numbers from the IMF weren't all that surprising. Were you surprised by them?
No, not at all. And I've got to say, the IMF is about as reliable as a jockey giving you a tip in the Melbourne Cup. You know, their predictions have not been great.
Hey, I'm banking on Chris Waller to come through with his personal tip for me tomorrow. So anyway, okay. As you were.
Anyway, I didn't say a jockey, I didn't say a trader.
Yeah, that's true.
But the bottom line, I think, is that the IMF invariably will look at the data that comes through from Treasury and the Reserve Bank. And look, 1.7% was the last number we've got. Yeah, look, but I've got to say, UBS, and I think I shared this with you a couple of weeks ago, they thought we'd grow at 2.2% by the end of this calendar year. And that's looking increasingly more difficult to believe because apart from the job market, the other data, particularly consumer confidence and business confidence, hasn't been great. But, you know, I think Peter Costello mentioned this week that, you know, the trade surplus, the current account surplus in terms of trade are all looking pretty good. So I think the IMF is probably on the downside. They do think that we go from 1.7% this calendar year to 2.2% next year. So they do see an improvement year to year, but I wouldn't worry too much about the IMF. And I think that's what the market didn't really get all upset about.
Peter, there had been a great deal of talk or expectation that the next rate cut was going to come on Melbourne Cup Day. Is that dead in the water now, or is there still, you know, a decent enough chance of that still happening? I guess there's probably going to be a few more statistics that come out between now and then that could send it either way.
Yeah, I think it's a lower chance now because they cut in October. And there's a lot of talk, and once again, I bring up Peter Costello. He basically has said that he thinks monetary policy has run its course. And I think there's a lot of people jumping on that bandwagon, and it's probably the right bandwagon. I've had a gutful of these rate cuts. I don't think we're getting enough bang for our buck. And I think in many ways it is time for Josh Frydenberg and Scott Morrison to talk about maybe tax cuts for low income, maybe middle income Australians, because, you know, I think that's probably what this economy needs as a circuit breaker, because we kind of seem to be in an economic funk, whatever that is, and we're not going anywhere apart from the job market, which is absolutely fantastic that we're finding jobs.
Well, of the fiscal levers that can be pulled by the government, what do you think the most important are? There's talk about bringing forward infrastructure projects. The question is, are they shovel-ready, though? So if they're not, what's the point? The other questions are about tax cuts that are already legislated. You can bring those forward. But all these projects and all this fast-tracking would surely threaten the budget surplus.
Yeah, they would. And I know... once again, Peter Costello is sort of concerned that we might undermine the improvement in the budget. But, you know, the shovel-ready problems of infrastructure, look, that's what we really do need. And, like, he also mentioned we need deregulation, more deregulation, which is a really good idea, but you can't introduce that really quickly, just like you can't introduce the building of a new hospital or a new bridge all that quickly. And from my point of view, the economy is in such a sort of a vulnerable position. We can either go up or go down from here. And if we start talking about deregulation or bringing forward infrastructure spending, that's a bit like seeing an overweight guy have a heart attack at the MCG in a grand final, and someone's yelling out, put him on a low-fat diet, it's not going to save him from a heart attack at that point in time. So I think you actually need to get in there and do a heart-to-heart massage, and the equivalent thing would be tax cuts. And I think tax cuts targeted at low and middle-income Australians would actually be spent, because they need the money and they would spend the money, and that would be good for the economy in the short term.
Just finally, Pete, how are stock tips doing?
Yeah, I think everyone, I was checking them up before I came in, just in case you try to embarrass me. They're all up. They're all up. And in particular, on Friday in the US, Caterpillar was up 6% on the night.
Pete, I was looking at getting involved, and then, all this talk about the trade war was supposed to come to an end, but then it didn't really, and then I thought, I'll just hold off a little bit longer.
Well, yeah, look, I can't give you advice on it because I don't know your personal financial circumstances, but I think you're fabulously well paid. So therefore,
no, I'm heavily mortgaged, mate, so I got nothing.
Yeah, certainly I think that those, if we get a proper trade deal rather than phase one, if we get a proper one, I think all of those will probably head in the right direction. I think every one of them was up, anywhere between 2 to 4% over the week. So it wasn't a bad tip when I stuck my neck out for you guys, but we do need Donald to really make it a proper trade deal.
It won't go on forever. I reckon you're right.
Yeah, eventually.
Eventually there will be some kind of deal. I tell you what, Tips, it's like a white-collar gambling. I like it. Pete, appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
Okay.